The first thing she tried to silence wasn't my power drill. It was my right to use it. The sound of the drill echoed across the cedar boards at exactly 9:02 on a bright Saturday morning. A steady mechanical hum rolled through the cool air as fresh sawdust drifted onto my driveway. I had measured every cut twice before squeezing the trigger. The old porch railing had finally reached the point where it needed to be replaced, and after checking the city's permitted construction hours earlier that week, I knew I was well within them. The neighborhood was just beginning to wake up. A teenager coasted down the sidewalk on a bicycle. Someone a few houses away started a lawn mower. Birds scattered from a maple tree every time my drill bit into another screw. It felt like every ordinary suburban weekend I had lived for years. Then the sound of hard heels striking concrete broke through the rhythm. I looked up before she spoke. Linda Foster crossed the street with the confidence of someone who expected every conversation to end exactly the way she wanted. Navy blazer despite the warm weather. Clipboard tucked beneath one arm. Perfectly styled blonde hair. A practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. She didn't wave. She didn't ask what I was repairing. She walked straight onto the edge of my driveway and raised one hand. Turn it off. I released the trigger. The sudden silence felt louder than the drill itself. What seems to be the problem? I asked. Linda glanced towards several neighboring houses before answering, making sure she had an audience. You're disturbing the entire community. I set the drill on the porch rail and wiped cedar dust from my hands. It's after 9. That doesn't matter. Her voice stayed calm, almost pleasant, but every word landed like it had already been approved somewhere else. The HOA has standards. Excessive construction noise is unacceptable. Across the street, a garage door stopped halfway open. An elderly couple paused during their morning walk. A curtain shifted inside the house next door. People weren't gathering because of my drill anymore. They were gathering because Linda had arrived. I'm replacing one railing. I said evenly. Nothing major. She made a quick note on her clipboard without looking at me. You should have requested approval before making this kind of disturbance. The statement caught my attention more than the accusation. Approval for noise? That sounded different from approval for architectural changes. I don't remember reading that requirement. You don't need to remember it, she replied. You need to follow it. The fake warmth in her smile never changed. Neither did the pressure behind it. A pickup truck rolled slowly down the street before stopping near the curb. The driver stayed inside, pretending to check his phone while watching us through the windshield. Linda noticed. Good. She wanted witnesses. This is your official warning, she continued. If you continue operating that drill today, the association will consider additional enforcement. I looked at the quiet neighborhood. Someone's leaf blower started 2 streets away. A dog barked behind a wooden fence. A garbage truck rumbled somewhere beyond the subdivision. None of those sounds seemed to concern her. Only mine. I picked up the drill again, not to switch it on, but to brush another layer of sawdust from its handle. Then I looked directly at her clipboard. For my own records, I said, could you tell me exactly which HOA rule says I can't use a power drill at this hour? For the first time since she walked across the street, Linda didn't answer immediately. Linda's silence lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough. She lowered her eyes to the clipboard, flipped one page with deliberate precision, then another, as if the answer had simply slipped out of place. Finally, she looked back at me. I don't need to quote the rules, she said evenly. It's my responsibility to enforce them. The words drifted across the quiet street. Several neighbors exchanged brief glances without saying anything. That answer bothered me far more than if she had actually cited a regulation. Every homeowners association had governing documents. Covenants, architectural standards, meeting minutes, procedures. Even the strictest boards relied on written policies. Authority wasn't supposed to exist without documentation. Yet Linda spoke as though her opinion carried the same weight as the rules themselves. I kept my voice calm. So there's no section number? Her smile became thinner. I've been president for 6 years, Mr. Carter. It wasn't an answer. I know these rules. Another pause. I'd appreciate the section number. Instead of responding, she wrote something else on her clipboard. The scratching of her pen sounded louder than the birds overhead. When she finished, she carefully tore off a carbon copy and extended it toward me. This serves as your first written warning. I accepted the paper. Across the top, bold letters read, Notice of community disturbance below that were my address, today's date, and a short paragraph stating that excessive construction noise had generated complaints within the neighborhood. Complaints. That word caught my attention immediately. I slowly looked around. Mrs. Reynolds, the retired schoolteacher from 2 houses down, offered me an awkward smile before continuing her morning walk. Tom Henderson stood beside his pickup truck with folded arms, saying nothing. Across the street, a young couple carried grocery bags toward their front door. No one looked angry. No one appeared disturbed. Most seemed curious. I looked back at Linda. Who filed the complaints? I'm not required to disclose that. I didn't ask for names. She remained perfectly still. I'm asking whether anyone besides you actually complained. Her expression never changed. The association received concerns. From whom? She tapped the clipboard once with her pen. That's confidential. Again, not an answer. The more she avoided simple questions, the more confident I became that something wasn't adding up. I glanced at the notice once more. There it was again. No rule number. No article. No section. No reference to the city ordinance. Nothing except broad statements that could have been written by anyone. I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into my back pocket. I'll keep this. I suggest you do. And I'll review the governing documents this afternoon. You won't find what you're looking for. That sentence made me stop. Not because of what she said. Because of how certain she sounded. She wasn't telling me what the rules were. She was telling me not to bother checking them. The realization settled quietly. People who rely on written rules usually invite others to read them. People who rely on authority alone often hope no one ever does. Linda adjusted the clipboard beneath her arm. If that drill starts again today, she said, I'll have no choice but to recommend financial penalties. She turned before I could respond. Her heels clicked steadily across the asphalt as she walked back toward her house, never once looking over her shoulder. One by one, the neighbors drifted away. Garage doors closed. The pickup truck pulled forward. The street slowly returned to the ordinary rhythm of a suburban Saturday. Only then did I unfold the notice again. The page looked official. The language sounded official. But something important was missing. I read every line twice. Then a third time. The absence became impossible to ignore. There wasn't a single citation anywhere on the page. Not one HOA bylaw. Not one city ordinance. Not one sentence pointing to an actual written rule. I slipped the notice into a folder inside my workshop. If Linda believed authority alone would end the conversation, she had underestimated one thing. I never argue with paperwork. I read it. There are moments when the loudest sound in a house isn't a power drill. It's the quiet click of a laptop opening after everyone else has gone home. By early evening, the porch looked exactly as I had left it. Half of the old railing leaned against the garage wall. New cedar boards rested on 2 sawhorses, waiting for another day. The drill sat on my workbench, unplugged, surrounded by a thin layer of fresh sawdust that still carried the sharp, clean scent of cut wood. Inside, I brewed a cup of black coffee and carried it into the small office overlooking the backyard. Linda's warning notice lay beside my keyboard. I flattened the page with my palm. Official logo. Official formatting. Official language. Still no rule. I logged into the HOA homeowner portal. The governing documents filled an entire folder: covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Architectural review guidelines. Community standards. Enforcement procedures. Meeting minutes stretching back nearly a decade. If Linda was right, the answer should be easy to find. I began reading. Section after section described landscaping requirements. Fence heights. Mailbox colors. Exterior paint approvals. Holiday decoration deadlines. Parking restrictions. Pool safety. Rental limitations. Everything was numbered. Everything referenced another document. Everything had procedures. Except the rule Linda claimed I had violated. An hour passed. Then another. Outside, the neighborhood lights slowly came on one porch at a time. The coffee beside me had gone cold. I searched electronically for every obvious word. Noise. Construction. Power tools. Repairs. Drilling. Weekend. Saturday. Disturbance. The results were surprisingly short. Most of them referred to architectural approval before changing the appearance of a home. Nothing prohibited operating ordinary tools during the day. Nothing even mentioned power drills. I leaned back in my chair. Maybe I had overlooked something. So I stopped searching the HOA documents for a while and opened the city's municipal code instead. That search took less than 5 minutes. Chapter after chapter addressed public nuisance regulations. construction hours, commercial equipment, residential maintenance. Unlike the HOA documents, the city's code spoke plainly. Residential repair work was permitted during established daytime hours. I checked the clock in the corner of my screen. Saturday, 9:02 a.m. exactly when I had started drilling. Well within the permitted window. I compared the city ordinance with the warning notice again. Linda had never mentioned the city. She had only spoken about the HOA. That distinction suddenly felt important. Very important. My phone vibrated on the desk. A text from my neighbor Tom Henderson. Everything okay today? I smiled faintly. Yeah, just reading HOA documents. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A few seconds later another message arrived. Interesting. Nothing else. The single word lingered in my thoughts longer than it probably should have. Interesting. Not sorry. Not she was. Right. Just interesting. It made me wonder whether today's confrontation had surprised only me. I opened the association's archive of previous board meeting minutes. Most homeowners would never read them. I wasn't most homeowners anymore. Meeting after meeting listed landscaping approvals, budget votes, maintenance contracts, committee appointments. Then I noticed something unusual. During the past 2 years, several discussions mentioned complaints about neighborhood noise, lawn equipment, leaf blowers, pressure washers, garage workshops. Yet every motion ended almost the same way. No enforcement recommended. Matter closed. No violation established. I read those words twice. If previous complaints had been dismissed, why had Linda handed me a written warning before citing a single rule? The pattern began taking shape, not as proof, but as a question. Questions were safer than assumptions. Assumptions start arguments. Questions uncover answers. I reached into my pocket and unfolded Linda's notice one more time. This time I didn't read what was printed on the page. I studied what wasn't. No article number. No bylaw citation. No ordinance reference. No appeal instructions. For a document carrying so much authority, it contained remarkably little law. I slid it into a labeled folder. HOA. If this ever became more than a disagreement on a Saturday morning, I wanted every piece of paper exactly where I could find it. Something told me the next move wouldn't belong to me. It would belong to Linda. And this time, I'd be ready before she knocked on my door. Monday morning arrived with the kind of silence that makes ordinary sounds feel important. The coffee maker clicked. The refrigerator hummed. My email inbox refreshed. At exactly 8:17 a.m., a new message appeared. Subject: second notice of community violation. I hadn't touched the drill since Saturday. I opened the email anyway. The message was signed by Linda Foster, HOA president. The wording was almost identical to the paper notice she had handed me 2 days earlier. It claimed I had continued conduct inconsistent with community standards and warned that additional enforcement actions could follow if the disturbance was not corrected. I read the entire email twice. Again, no bylaw, no article number, no citation, only broad language wrapped in official formatting. This time, however, there was something new. Attached to the email was a PDF labeled Incident Report. I downloaded it immediately. The report listed the date, my address, the approximate time. Then one line caught my attention. Reporting officer, Linda Foster. There were no additional reporting parties. No witness statements. No supporting photographs. No measurements. No references to city ordinances. Just Linda. On Saturday, she had repeatedly said the neighborhood had complained. Now the official report suggested something entirely different. I leaned closer to the screen. If other homeowners had actually submitted complaints, why weren't they documented? If multiple residents had reported excessive noise, why was there only one reporting person? Curiosity replaced frustration. I opened the board meeting archive again. Instead of searching for noise this time, I searched for Linda's name. Hundreds of entries appeared. Budget meetings, committee appointments, violation hearings, routine business. Then I noticed a pattern. Nearly every enforcement discussion began with the same phrase, following homeowner complaints. But when disciplinary action was approved, the minutes almost always referenced documented evidence. Photographs, inspection reports, contractor observations, architectural reviews, paper trails. Everything had supporting documentation. Everything except my case. Mine consisted of Linda's opinion and nothing else. I printed the incident report and laid it beside Saturday's warning notice. The similarities became impossible to ignore. Same wording, same formatting, Same missing citations. Same absence of evidence. I reached for a yellow legal pad and began writing a simple timeline. Saturday, 9:02 a.m. started replacing porch railing. 9:05 a.m. Linda arrived. Issued verbal warning. Issued written notice. Sunday, no construction. Monday, second notice by email. As I finished writing, another thought crossed my mind. If Linda truly believed I was violating a legitimate HOA rule, why hadn't she simply copied the rule into the email? It would have taken less than 30 seconds. Instead, every communication relied on authority rather than documentation. That wasn't proof of wrongdoing. It was proof of confidence. Or perhaps overconfidence. Around lunchtime, my doorbell rang. Tom Henderson stood outside holding a package that had been delivered to his porch by mistake. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He handed me the box, but didn't leave immediately. I heard Linda stopped by Saturday. News traveled fast. She did. Tom shifted his weight. "You know?" He hesitated. "I've seen her do that before." I looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" He glanced instinctively toward Linda's house before lowering his voice. "She usually tells people they're breaking HOA rules." "And are they?" He shrugged. "Sometimes." "And the other times?" Another pause. "They usually just give in before checking." That sentence stayed with me long after Tom walked away. Before checking. Maybe that was the entire strategy. Count on people being too busy, too intimidated, or too exhausted to read the documents for themselves. I returned to my office and looked once more at the neat stack of papers growing on my desk. The notices, the incident report, the meeting minutes, the city ordinance. Individually, none of them proved much. Together, they told a story that felt increasingly difficult to ignore. Linda wasn't just insisting she was right. She seemed to be counting on no one ever asking her to prove it. The strongest evidence rarely announces itself. It waits quietly until someone bothers to collect it. By Tuesday afternoon, my dining room table no longer looked like part of a home. It looked like the corner of a law office. Every document sat inside its own folder. The original warning notice, the follow-up email, the incident report, copies of the HOA governing documents, highlighted pages from the city's municipal code, my handwritten timeline. I wasn't building a case against Linda. Not yet. I was building a record. There was a difference. Facts have a way of surviving long after emotions disappear. I bought a 3-ring binder during my lunch break and slipped every document into plastic sleeves. The first tab read, HOA notices. The second, city ordinances. The third, timeline. Simple, organized, impossible to misplace. When I finished, I stepped onto the porch for the first time since Saturday. The unfinished railing was still waiting. The new cedar boards hadn't moved. Neither had the drill resting quietly on my workbench. I resisted the temptation to finish the project. Not because I thought Linda was right. Because patience often produces better evidence than confrontation. My phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. City Building and Code Services. I answered immediately. A friendly woman introduced herself as Karen from the city's information desk. I explained the situation without mentioning Linda by name. "I just have a question," I said. "If a homeowner replaces a porch railing during the city's permitted construction hours, is that generally allowed?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." "No permit required?" "Not for a simple repair like you're describing." "What about power tools?" "As long as you're within the local noise ordinance hours, ordinary residential tools are perfectly acceptable." Her answer matched exactly what I had already found. Still, hearing another person confirm it mattered. Would it be possible to receive that information in writing? There was a short pause. "Certainly." She gave me an email address and asked me to submit the question formally. "We can respond with the applicable code section." Exactly what I had hoped for. After hanging up, I drafted the email carefully. No accusations. No complaints. Just one straightforward request asking the city to clarify the ordinance governing residential repair work and permissible construction hours. I pressed send. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. Not from the city. From Linda. The subject line read, "Final courtesy reminder courtesy." The word almost made me smile. The email informed me that the board expected immediate compliance and warned that continued violations could result in monetary penalties after the next scheduled board meeting. Again, no rule. Again, no citation. Again, only authority. This time I noticed something else. The email had been copied to every member of the HOA board. Interesting. If the matter eventually reached a hearing, every board member would already have Linda's version of events. That meant they also deserved to see the complete picture. I created another folder in my binder. Future correspondence. Every email received. Every response sent. Every attachment. Nothing deleted. Nothing edited. Just preserved. Late that afternoon, a white pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Tom climbed out carrying a tape measure. I figured you might need an extra hand when you finished that railing. I thanked him, but told him I was waiting a little longer. He looked surprised. You're letting her win? I shook my head. No. I looked toward the unfinished porch. I'm letting her make the next mistake. Tom stared at me for a second before a slow grin spread across his face. You've already found something, haven't you? Not exactly. What then? I looked through the front window at the binder resting on my dining room table. I've found what's missing. He followed my eyes. The rule. I nodded once. If she wants to find me, sooner or later she's going to have to show everyone exactly where that rule exists. Tom laughed quietly. And if it doesn't? I didn't answer immediately. A cool breeze moved through the unfinished railing, carrying the scent of fresh cedar across the porch. For the first time since Saturday, the project no longer felt like the center of the story. The drill had never really been the issue. The real question was whether authority could survive after someone asked it for proof. And I had a feeling that question would soon be answered in front of far more people than just the two of us. The email from the city arrived the next morning. No dramatic notification. No triumphant music. Just the quiet chime of a new message appearing in my inbox. I opened it carefully. The response was concise, professional, and exactly what I had requested. The city confirmed that ordinary residential repair work, including the use of handheld power tools, was permitted during established daytime hours. It also included the exact municipal code section governing construction noise, complete with the ordinance number and a direct quotation from the regulation. There it was. Not an opinion. Not an interpretation. An actual law. I printed the email immediately. Then I placed it inside the binder behind the tab labeled City Ordinances. For the first time since Saturday morning, I wasn't relying only on my own research. I had written confirmation from the authority that actually enforced the city's noise regulations. My phone buzzed before I could close the binder. Another HOA email. This one was different. Notice of compliance hearing the board would hold a disciplinary meeting the following Tuesday evening. My attendance was strongly encouraged. Possible outcomes included formal fines and additional enforcement measures. I read the sentence twice. So this was how it would happen. Not through another conversation on my driveway. Not through another warning slipped into my hand. In a meeting. In front of the board. Exactly where written evidence mattered most. I didn't feel nervous. I felt prepared. That afternoon, I drove to a copy center and printed 3 complete sets of every document. One for myself. One for the board. One as a backup. Each page sat neatly inside its own folder. Every document was dated. Every email remained in chronological order. Every ordinance was highlighted. When I returned home, I noticed movement across the street. Linda was speaking with 2 board members near the neighborhood mailbox. She held a folder under her arm. Even from a distance, her gestures were confident. She pointed once toward my house. One of the board members nodded. The other simply listened. I couldn't hear a word. I didn't try. Whatever conversation they were having would eventually matter less than the documents waiting inside my binder. Evidence doesn't become stronger because it's discussed in a parking lot. Later that evening, there was another knock at my front door. This time it wasn't Tom. It was Mrs. Reynolds. The retired schoolteacher still carried herself with the quiet posture of someone who had spent decades standing in front of classrooms. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. She hesitated before speaking. I saw what happened Saturday. I nodded. So did half the neighborhood. She smiled gently. Then her expression became more serious. I've lived here 12 years. Another pause. I've never seen anyone actually ask Linda to show the rule. The sentence hung between us. Not because it was dramatic. Because it sounded honest. Mrs. Reynolds reached into her purse and handed me a folded sheet of paper. I thought you might want this. It was a copy of last year's HOA newsletter. She pointed to one paragraph highlighted in yellow. The board encourages homeowners to verify all governing documents before reporting potential violations. I looked at her. You kept this. I keep everything. She smiled again. Old teacher habit. I laughed quietly. Apparently, I wasn't the only person in the neighborhood who believed paperwork mattered. As she turned to leave, she stopped at the end of the walkway. Mr. Carter? Yes. Stay calm next Tuesday. She glanced toward Linda's house before looking back at me. People pay closer attention to the quiet person holding the documents than the loud person holding the clipboard. After she left, I unfolded the newsletter again. The highlighted sentence seemed almost symbolic. Verify the governing documents. Exactly what I had done from the very beginning. I carried the newsletter inside and added it to the binder. The pages were beginning to fill every section. Warnings, emails, city ordinances, meeting minutes, correspondence. Now a community newsletter. Each piece alone was ordinary. Together, they formed something much harder to dismiss. I closed the binder and rested my hand on its cover. The hearing was only a few days away. Linda probably believed she was walking into another routine enforcement meeting. I had a feeling she was about to discover the difference between authority that demands obedience and authority that can actually withstand evidence. Tuesday evening arrived with clear skies and unusually cool air. The community clubhouse sat at the center of the neighborhood, its lights glowing through tall windows as homeowners slowly filtered inside. Most carried nothing more than their phones or a folded agenda. I carried a binder. It wasn't heavy, but every step toward the entrance made it feel more important. Inside, rows of metal chairs faced a long table where 5 board members were already seated. Linda occupied the center chair. Her clipboard rested neatly beside a small stack of papers. She greeted arriving residents with practiced confidence, smiling just enough to appear welcoming. When our eyes met across the room, her expression barely changed. Only the corners of her smile tightened. I chose a seat in the second row instead of the front. Close enough to hear, far enough to observe. The meeting began exactly at 7. Routine business came first. Budget approvals, landscaping contracts, a discussion about replacing streetlights near the south entrance. Everything moved according to the printed agenda. Professional, predictable. Then the board secretary turned another page. Next item. She looked toward Linda. Compliance hearing regarding Lot 27. My address. Every conversation in the room stopped. Linda folded her hands together. Mr. Carter, she said, thank you for attending. I nodded politely. She continued in the same calm voice she had used on my driveway days earlier. The board has received reports regarding repeated construction noise creating a disturbance within the community. Reports. Plural. I noticed the word immediately. She summarized the timeline. Saturday morning. Warning issued. Follow-up correspondence. Continued concern. To anyone hearing the story for the first time, it sounded organized. Almost routine. When she finished, Linda looked toward the other board members. The homeowner has been given multiple opportunities to comply. One member adjusted his glasses. Another quietly reviewed the paperwork in front of him. No one spoke. Linda turned toward me. Mr. Carter, would you like to respond before the board discusses possible penalties? The room became very still. I stood slowly, carrying only the binder. No loose papers. No dramatic gestures. Just the binder. Yes, I said. I would. I walked to the small podium near the front of the room. The wood creaked softly beneath my hand as I placed the binder on its surface. For a moment, I simply looked around the room. Several neighbors were watching closely. Tom sat near the back. Mrs. Reynolds offered the slightest nod of encouragement. I opened the binder. Plastic sleeves reflected the overhead lights. I appreciate the board's time. My voice remained steady. I'd like to begin with a very simple question. I looked directly at Linda. Could you please identify the specific HOA bylaw I violated? Silence. Linda answered almost immediately. The homeowner created excessive construction noise. I nodded once. I understand that's your position. I kept my tone respectful. I'm asking for the governing document. Another pause. The community standards prohibit disturbances. Which section? Linda glanced briefly at the papers in front of her. The board has authority to maintain neighborhood harmony. Again, not an answer. I waited. The silence stretched long enough for several people to shift in their chairs. Finally, one of the other board members leaned forward. Linda. His voice was calm. Do we have the citation? She looked toward him. It's covered under our enforcement authority. He frowned slightly. I understand. He tapped the packet lying in front of him. I'm asking whether the violation notice references a specific bylaw. For the first time since this began, Linda didn't answer immediately. She opened her folder, turned one page, then another. The same deliberate movements she had made on my driveway. Searching, not finding. Across the room, someone quietly cleared their throat. Another homeowner leaned forward in his chair. No one interrupted. No one whispered. The silence itself had become part of the meeting. I gently removed one document from my binder. Not the city ordinance. Not yet. Just the original warning notice Linda had handed me on Saturday morning. I held it carefully between my fingers. This, I said, is the notice I received. I looked at every member of the board before placing it on the podium. I've read it dozens of times. Then I turned one page inside the binder and rested my hand on the neatly organized stack beneath it. And I'd like everyone here to notice exactly what isn't written anywhere on it. No one reached for the document. Not at first. The single sheet remained on the podium between me and the board, almost ordinary in appearance. A warning notice. Printed logo. Official formatting. Confident language. But confidence isn't evidence. The board member with the glasses finally extended his hand. May I? Of course. He studied the notice carefully. His eyes moved from the first paragraph to the last. Then back again. His forehead tightened almost imperceptibly. He passed it to the secretary beside him. She read more slowly. The silence inside the clubhouse deepened. Finally, she looked up. I don't see a bylaw reference. No, I replied quietly. You won't. Linda leaned forward. Our enforcement authority isn't limited to individual sections. I nodded politely. I understand. Then I opened the binder again. I anticipated that answer. I removed the second document. The follow-up email. This was sent 2 days later. I handed copies to each board member. Again they read. Again the same result. No article number. No governing document. No citation. Only broad statements describing violations that had never been connected to any written rule. The chairman looked toward Linda. Is there another page? No. A supplemental attachment? No. He rested both hands on the table. So where is the specific violation? Linda answered more firmly this time. The homeowner created unnecessary construction noise. I didn't interrupt. She continued. The board has an obligation to preserve the peaceful enjoyment of the community. The chairman nodded once. No one disagrees. He tapped the notice gently. But enforcement still has to be based on governing documents. Another silence. I waited. Linda searched through her folder again. This time everyone in the room watched. Paper after paper slid across the table. Meeting agendas. Community newsletters. Budget reports. Blank enforcement forms. Nothing that answered the chairman's question. I reached into my binder once more. This may help. I distributed copies of the city's written response. Not dramatically. 1 page at a time. Every board member received the same highlighted ordinance. The chairman adjusted his glasses and read aloud. Residential maintenance and repair activities using ordinary handheld power tools are permitted during established daytime hours. He stopped reading and looked at me. You contacted the city? Yes. I wanted to make sure I understood the law before responding. He nodded thoughtfully before finishing the paragraph himself. The room remained completely still. Then another board member spoke for the first time. What time did the work begin? 9:02 Saturday morning. He looked toward Linda. Do we dispute that? She hesitated. No. And city hours begin? I answered quietly. 8 o'clock. He compared the ordinance with my timeline. Then with the incident report. Then something else caught his attention. This report lists only one reporting party. He lifted the incident report. I thought there were multiple complaints. The words landed harder than anything I had said. I turned toward Linda. She cleared her throat. There were verbal concerns from neighbors. Were they documented? No. Written? No. Recorded anywhere? Linda remained silent. The chairman slowly folded his hands. So the official incident report reflects only your own observation. She finally nodded. Yes. Across the room, someone released a slow breath. Another homeowner shifted in his chair. Tom looked toward the floor, shaking his head almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Reynolds simply watched without changing expression. I wasn't interested in embarrassing anyone. That had never been the goal. I opened the final section of my binder. One more document. The HOA newsletter Mrs. Reynolds had saved. I placed copies on the table. The highlighted sentence seemed strangely appropriate under the bright clubhouse lights. The board encourages homeowners to verify all governing documents before reporting potential violations. The secretary read it aloud, then looked directly at Linda. For the first time all evening, no one spoke. No explanations. No objections. Only paper. Printed words. Official records. The chairman closed his folder with deliberate care. He looked around the table before finally speaking. I believe the board needs a brief executive recess. He turned toward the audience. Mr. Carter, thank you for your documentation. Then he looked at Linda. We'll need to discuss several procedural issues before reaching any decision. Linda didn't respond. She simply stared at the stack of documents spread across the table. The same paperwork she had assumed no one would ever read. And for the first time since she walked onto my driveway with a clipboard in her hand, she looked like someone who had just realized the evidence was no longer hers to control. The board returned 12 minutes later. No one spoke while they walked back to their seats. The chairman placed a single sheet of paper in front of him. Linda carried her clipboard, but it remained closed. For the first time since the meeting began, she wasn't looking around the room. She was looking at the table. The chairman adjusted the microphone. Thank you for your patience. His voice remained calm, measured, almost gentle. The board has completed its preliminary review of the documents presented this evening. He paused briefly. We have determined that the violation notice issued to Mr. Carter does not identify a specific governing bylaw or covenant. A quiet murmur moved through the audience. He continued. Additionally, the documentation presented does not establish that the homeowner violated the applicable municipal noise ordinance. Another pause. Accordingly, the board unanimously dismisses the proposed enforcement action. No applause. No celebration. Just silence. The kind that arrives when everyone realizes the answer has become unavoidable. The chairman wasn't finished. Furthermore, he looked down at his notes. We will be conducting an internal review of our compliance procedures to ensure future enforcement notices include proper citations and supporting documentation. Several board members nodded. One even made additional notes beside the agenda. The chairman turned toward me. Mr. Carter, thank you for presenting your concerns respectfully. I nodded back. Thank you for hearing them. That was all. No speech. No victory lap. No demand for an apology. The meeting simply continued. The next agenda item concerned repainting the neighborhood entrance sign. Life, it seemed, moved forward remarkably quickly. As homeowners began leaving the clubhouse, Tom caught up with me near the parking lot. You could have buried her in there. I slipped the binder under my arm. I wasn't trying to. He laughed softly. I know. He glanced back toward the building. That's probably why you won. Mrs. Reynolds walked past us with the slow confidence of someone who had already seen enough arguments in one lifetime. She smiled. I told you. I smiled back. You did. The quiet person with the documents. She nodded once before continuing toward her car. The parking lot gradually emptied. Linda emerged several minutes later. Alone, she walked toward her vehicle without the confident stride I'd seen so many times before. Halfway across the lot, she stopped. She looked in my direction. For a second, I thought she might say something. Instead, she gave a small nod. Not friendly. Not warm. Simply an acknowledgement that the evening had ended differently than either of us expected. I returned the nod. Nothing more. Nothing less. The following Saturday morning, I carried the drill back onto my porch. The same cedar boards waited where I had left them. The same cool morning breeze drifted through the neighborhood. At exactly 9:02 a.m., I pulled the trigger. The drill came to life with the familiar mechanical hum that had started everything. No one knocked. No warning notice appeared. No clipboard. No accusations. Only the clean scent of fresh-cut cedar and the steady rhythm of honest work. Tom waved from across the street. Mrs. Reynolds watered her flowers. Children rode bicycles past the house without paying me the slightest attention. It felt wonderfully ordinary. Within an hour, the new railing was finished. I stepped back and rested one hand against the smooth cedar. Solid. Level. Complete. Just like the binder resting on the shelf inside my house. I never threw it away. Not because I expected another fight, but because it reminded me of something worth remembering. Authority deserves respect. Evidence deserves trust. The two are not always the same. As the sun climbed higher, I packed away the drill and brushed the sawdust from my hands. The neighborhood looked exactly as it had before any of this began. The only thing that had truly changed was invisible. From that day forward, every violation notice issued by the HOA included the exact bylaw being enforced. Every complaint required supporting documentation. Every homeowner knew they had the right to ask one simple question. Show me the rule. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with raised voices. Sometimes it arrives in a 3-ring binder, a highlighted ordinance, and the patience to let the facts speak first. And in the end, I didn't defeat Linda. I simply refused to surrender the truth to someone who expected no one would ever bother reading the paperwork.